Hey there, everybody. Just wanted to have a little sort of podcast style video for you here, and I'll make it pretty short. It's a little bit late here at night for me as I'm filming this. It's been one of those Saturdays, and you know how it goes, especially when you have the kids. You find yourself spending all of your time running around doing this errand and that errand, don't have much time to think. The thing that I wanted to talk about here a little bit really, really quickly is sort of the dearth of team statistics in baseball. I'm thinking in particular about, the Dynasties book, if you read the blog that I keep talking about here and there. One of the things that I like about that book, the Baseball Dynasties by Nair and Epstein, despite the fact that it was published like almost 25 years ago, now I'm starting to feel pretty old. But one of the things I like about it is the emphasis on team play and on the greatness of teams in a sport that puts so much emphasis on individual accomplishments. It's kind of nice to see something that's done with the team in mind for a change. One of the problems I think that we've seen in the world of sabermetrics over the last, couple decades. I mean, now we're really feeling old. I'm about to say, well, let's see. Bill James started in the 70s. That was his first book came out almost 50 years ago. So, but I won't rub that in anyone's face. One of the things that I've disliked, though, about sabermetrics is the focus that we have all the time on individual accomplishment. There is a lot of bias that goes on here in favor of two different things. It's in favor mostly of offense and of a certain type of offense that would be the sort of hit a lot of line drives and strike out a lot, but we don't care so much type of offensive approach. There's a reason why you see a lot of that in today's baseball game. It is directly influenced by sabermetrics. The second problem, though, that I see is that it's all focused on individual awards. So we spend a lot of time talking about how can we look at the number of wins a player has contributed to, if you're Bill James, or the number of wins that he's made above what the replacement level player would be if you're everybody else. And that's kind of problematic thinking, because instead of focusing so much on the individual, I think we should think a lot more about the team. There's a little bit of a method to the madness. There are two things in particular I think that have become lost. One that we see a lot of, and one that I think is a little bit more invisible. The one that we see a lot of, and that those of us who've watched a lot of baseball know is missing, is sort of the running game. Not just stolen bases, but the concept of doing hit and run, or run and hit, or different combinations of the two. Something that's been abstracted in games like APBA and Strat-O-Matic, and that becomes a little bit less abstract when you're playing with Diamond Mine. You can do a little bit more. You can do a bit more than that if you play with Action PC or if you play with OOTP. But in the game of baseball itself, you don't quite see as much of this as you once did. I actually do wonder how teams from today would fare against a team like the 1894 Orioles, who were famous for playing that way a lot, because you don't see the same type of teamwork today. You see a lot of players up there at bat trying to do something big for themselves to get the glory for themselves, instead of thinking about what the best way is to knock the player to the next base, or to work with the player to make a certain hand signal or whatever. And that also, of course, leads to the end of sacrifice bunts. Now, this is a very controversial topic, though really it's only controversial among those of us who would like to see sacrifice bunts brought back. For most people, it's not much of a controversy. They say, oh, we didn't care about that at all anyway. And, we can clearly see that baseball drew a lot more supporters and a lot more fans when there were a lot more home runs. And I suppose it's possible. I suppose that's true to an extent. But in my mind, the real team aspect of the game involves a lot of bunting and that concept of sort of taking your at-bat, your position, and sacrificing, right? I'm going to write probably a number of blog posts about that in the future, and I'm still kind of chewing on a couple of things in my mind. The problem that you have is that there's not a good way statistically to prove the effectiveness of sacrifices or whatever. Instead, you kind of have to appeal to the thought of the sacrifice and the idea that, you're giving up a chance to do something that is good for perhaps something that's better in the context of the game. That's something I think is missing, and that I think is really caused by this focus on individualism in baseball as opposed to the team play. The second thing that you really don't see, though, is talk about defense, right? So we're talking about defense to the point today where we talk about what used to be called defense-independent defense-independent pitching statistics, what they now call fielding-independent pitching, which is what Tom Tango pushes and the folks over at Fangraphs. Now, fielding independent pitching does measure something. This isn't just garbage that we throw away, right? And there's an argument that it's a better measure of overall pitcher ability than ERA, which is almost certainly true. The response I would have to this, though, is that you have to realize that pitching has always been tied in together with fielding. In fact, anybody who's played baseball at any level knows that this is the case. It really surprises me to see sabermetricians want to make pitching something separate from the rest of defense when really the reality is that they mesh together and there's no way to separate them, right? The act of pitching itself involves both a pitcher and a catcher, though we tend to give a lot of credit just to the pitcher. The catcher is the one who calls the pitches. The catcher is the one who has to do all the thinking. The catcher is the one who has to say, okay, well, this is what you need to do, and this is what this guy is good against and what he's bad against. The catcher usually, traditionally at least, was the one who was trying to line the defense until, the game turned into NFL Light and all of that. I mean, that's the thing. You cannot separate the pitcher from the catcher. So this idea of fielding independent pitching statistics or, fielding independent pitching is, it's absolutely ludicrous on, the most basic level. It's not possible to do this. And it's a problem that I think that we see, a basic conceptual problem we see throughout the game of baseball. And the thing that's crazy to me about this is that when you look at infield shifts and outfield shifts, which I know are banned now, but when you look at the heyday of those, the reason why those were being called for is quite simply because the managers knew how they wanted to pitch against certain hitters, and they knew what the hitters were likely to do if you pitched against them a certain way, and it worked really, really well. Well, this is evidence, though, that pitching and fielding are one and the same, and instead of talking so much about individual accomplishment, how to separate them, we should be thinking about it in terms of team and in terms of a team sport. Anyway, I was thinking about this just the other day when I was talking about the what Nair and Epstein called the SD score, something that I want to call instead the domination index because I think it makes a lot more sense to say that. One of the things I really like about this is that it looks at runs scored as a team as a whole instead of looking at it as a collection of individuals. Now, when it comes to offense, we're pretty good at separating away the individuals from the team. When it comes to defense, we're really, really bad at doing this. And the truth is that you can get some hints as to how good or how bad a defensive team is by looking at the amount of runs they give up, right? And so it's a little bit better for us to look just overall at how many runs did this team give up against the league average, how many standard deviations away we are, and things like that. That will tell you not just anything about or something about pitching, that will tell you something about the fielding as well. You have to remember that a lot of base hits are caused not necessarily by poor pitching, but by fielders not being in the right place. We've known this, actually. We've known this throughout the history of baseball. The thing that surprises me is that people are like, oh, well, then we don't want to look at base hits. We want to look only at home runs, strikeouts, and walks. I mean, you're missing the point. The point is that the pitcher is part of the defense and needs to be seen as part of the defense instead of separate. Anyway, though, there's a little spiel for you. Basically, in my mind, there's this major push in the history of baseball statistics that we still see today away from group and team statistics and towards individual statistics. It's so ridiculous that even to this day, even though we have all these sabermetrics, when most people think about the best teams in history, they think right away about won-loss percentage, right? Instead of thinking about other statistics that are team-level statistics that are much better in terms of comparison across eras and that are a little bit more fair and that, are a little bit more, statistically significant. It's amazing. I mean, it's 2023, and yet many of our commentators in the world of team statistics have not advanced beyond won-loss percentage. So something needs to be done. Let's start it here. What do you think? Talk to you tomorrow. See ya. Bye.